This video is sponsored by G2A. Use cashback code DORON for 3% off on Warcraft products. Hello guys, this is Doronsmovies, and today I will be talking about the Abominations, what they are made of, and some theories. So, without further ado, let's get into the lore. Abominations have been in the game since Warcraft 3 and were always unique, scary, and even cute, as twisted as that sounds. Now, there are many different types of abominations and monstrosities, and how they're created is as bad as you might think, if not even worse. The first abominations were created in the catacombs of Scholomance by the fallen Mage of Dalaran, Kel'Thuzad, and his terrible cult of the Damned. They unearthed corpses, hacked them apart, and then pieced them together to serve the Scourge in the new war effort. The process is very complex and horrific. The necromancers utilize multiple bodies in all sorts of conditions, utilizing blood and embalming fluids to preserve the parts and to keep them functioning. Then they split them up and stitch them together for their purpose, which is generally war. They also use a heart in order to pump the sludge that drives their bodies. Now, after the physical part is done, now they need a brain to control this mindless individual. As this creation process causes significant brain damage, generally the creators search for someone smart to begin with. In one example, an undead required the brain of an alliance leader, which would be more intelligent than the average grunt. Once the brain is in place inside the body, they leave the reptilian nervous system while removing the higher cognitive functions. The reason for this is so that the creation doesn't develop its own independence, as well as to not remember who it originally was. So the final product is a massive, scary flesh creature with multiple limbs and very below average intelligence. Abominations are often compared with ogres in terms of size, strength, and intelligence, albeit ogres on occasion can be very smart. Now, their service depends. They can either be guards, cannon fodder, or commanders. In the case of commanders, it isn't really their intelligence and strategic mind and wit, but just their size and the intimidation factor in the battlefield. The original abominations were a massive part of the Scourge army, although the Forsaken continued and still use and create abominations. The Scourge had many different types of projects, starting with abominations formed mainly from fallen humans. However, they would decide to go much further, creating flesh beasts, much larger and more horrific creations, as well as flesh titans. Some of these were built from the dead storm giants in Northrend, which were very massive to begin with, but the story of the flesh titan Thaddeus in Extremis is much eerier. This massive monstrosity was actually constructed from the bodies of the fallen women and children harvested by the Scourge. This is fairly obvious by the terrible, heartbreaking screams during the fight. So, the point is that Scourge took this much further, and there was really just no limit to their cruelty as long as their power increased. However, the Forsaken, to this day, utilize and create abominations. Until recently, they were mainly formed in the Apothecarium and Undercity, rumored to be done from war prisoners, as well as fallen enemies, and some even say allies. However, their practice is fairly transparent, as you can constantly see tables with body parts and all sorts of machinery and tools that would be required for this horrific process. There is even a fan theory that the abominations are actually created from children, which would explain their seemingly blissful nature. They often mention playtime and the new toys, and are seemingly childish, as terrible as that sounds. However, this could just be a part of their simple mind. As explained previously, a big part of their intelligence is lost when these monstrosities are formed. Although, if true and if done by Sylvanas, this would definitely be a serious crime which would just pile on her seemingly endless list. Still, the Abominations are one of the most powerful undead creatures as they are massive, fearless, and extremely resilient. They even constantly rot and spread disease, but it doesn't really do much to them. This, of course, doesn't hurt the Forsaken as they are undead as well, but just being close to one can be very deadly for a living being. If the creature doesn't damage him, just his mere presence will. The Abominations' limited brains are also very useful for the undead, as they can easily be controlled and they never really think about rebelling or becoming independent or starting some sort of revolution, even though there were a few very isolated cases. So, the answer to the question of what they're made from is as bad as it sounds, and their creation process is one of the worst in World of Warcraft and absolutely sickening. However, the Abominations became a significant part of the fantasy universe, easily recognizable and even likable to an extent. Thank you for watching. Check out 5 good deeds of Sylvanas Windrunner by clicking on the screen, and do subscribe as it really helps out and keeps all the content going. See you next time.